Is it on now? Yes, I can hear it myself. The first thing to say, I'm absolutely struck by the kindness and unselfishness of all the other speakers up to now. And the more observant of you may notice that you're about to get some selfishness. Because frankly, oh good, frankly, the generosity you're talking about, the community engagement, is not my job. You wouldn't want it to be my job. Now, when I went to the Slade in 1970, they only took 12 students from the entire country. It's an extraordinary privilege for a provincial schoolboy to find myself there. But it also came with a responsibility. Artists don't normally have responsibilities, that's what makes them different. It came with a responsibility that you were expected to join a continuous line of artists. You had a job to do. My teacher was William Coldstream. He knew Walter Sickert. Walter Sickert knew Degas. Degas knew Delacroix. Delacroix knew David. We're there. That's 4 steps. It's 4 steps. It's not knowledge. They had a look in their eye. They had a look in their eye, which Coldstream picked up from Sickert, and so on. Let's give you something to look at. You've taken it away. Here we are. Go on. So I think earlier, maybe Nicola talked about the cave with the wonderful animals. I notice now with my grandchildren, I notice their developmental stages. We were too frantic with our own children to notice anything, but now I notice. And one of the very first things they're interested in, with a passion, is animals. The dog, the cat. Obsessed, frightened, obsessed. We're looking at our ancient selves. That's how art works. However, not everybody in the cave is an artist, I'm afraid, because only one of them could do the back legs of a bison. Have you ever tried to draw the back legs of a horse? Absolutely impossible. So I might have been the one doing the back legs of the horse, and people better equipped than me were killing the mammoth. So it's actually very important to distinguish between art and the artists and the general activity which children are engaged in. Children's art is not art. It's a lovely activity and we call it children's art. But why isn't it art? And the reason it isn't art is there is no jeopardy. Everything they do, we love. It's charming, it's full of personality, it's full of energy, it's full of colourfulness. But we're not moved, unless we know the child and their achievement, we're not moved by it. We're moved by adult art because we are aware of suffering and danger and what's coming and how to organize things and how to deal with complexity. And out of that, you get art. Now, there's an implication here, because the other thing you may be thinking is, why is that painting better than that painting? It's not really talked about very much, but it's a real thing. I'm just going to keep moving on with other pictures. This picture is called Cold Heaven. Actually, it's about how you can have 2 things in your mind at the same time, which is what we all do. Most of us have 5 things in our mind at the same time. That's a young me in, I think, the late 1980s. Right. So I was going to talk about how you decide between one thing and another. It's the responsibility of museums on our behalf and with your money to guide you towards what is more rewarding and what's less rewarding. So the curator should be disinterested, independent, but deeply knowledgeable. And the curator should be able to tell you why Matisse is great or why Rembrandt is great. Let's come back to the child. The child's art, essentially, particularly if they're painting themselves or painting a mother or another child, is a cartoon. It's a symbol of another person. But if you were to present that image to the parent, they'd be pleased with it, but it doesn't tell you about the particularity of the child. And any parent will know the particularity of their ears. Just take the ear. There isn't a single ear that's the same anywhere in the world. And the mother will know from a distance the shape of the head, the way they walk. It's particularity. One of the things that artists do is to look. And when it comes to the education of young people, I think probably more important than anything else is the ability to look. Looking, staring, but looking hard, because the particularity of the person in front of you is deeply humanizing. People who want to sell things to you regard you en masse, but that's not how we are to ourselves. We're individuals, and it's profoundly important. The reason Rembrandt, sticking my neck out here, is better than Andy Warhol, say, is because the tenderness and exactitude and frailty and jeopardy of Rembrandt, you could say the same of Vermeer, say that of any of the great artists in the canon, is more human than the irony and paradox of Andy Warhol. Please don't repeat this outside this room. But you may recognize it as a value. Just on the last slide, as quite a young artist, to my enormous surprise, I was asked to be on the board of the Tate. And of course, I felt very much out of my depth with what were called the captains of industry, with lawyers, with all these people, all far cleverer and more aware than me. Anyway, I sat there and I gradually learned how to speak about it. And I realized that when it came to art, I would have something to say because I know what it feels like. But what I also realized that what the Tate were looking for in adding to their collection was the great work of art. That was their responsibility. But there was also a divergence in aims between myself as an artist and the curators, because the curators essentially lived in a world of intellectual value and of ideas, and their professional world needed audacity, it needed innovation, and it needed possibly aspects of social mitigation, which we've been talking about recently. But the painters and the artists on the board were looking for the great work of art. And the great work of art is independent of issues, and it's independent of virtue. So having looked at the Tate and realized that government policy and government theory was interfering with the ability of the curators on your behalf to choose the great art, I felt very dissatisfied and worried by it, because it was coming more and more, the influence of politics into art. Because the great curators such as Kenneth Clark or Bernard Berenson or in our own time Brian Robertson loved art for its own sake, not for any other reason. So I then decided that some of the painting, to put all my energy and enthusiasm into the Royal Academy. The reason is this. The Royal Academy was set up to be essentially the voice of artists. Not the voice of state, government, church, anything, but the voice of artists, so they could jump across the barriers of patronage to you and show their work directly. So what you see in the much mocked summer exhibition is the liveliness, the carnival atmosphere of physical works of art, completely out of control, but abundant, extraordinary abundance. I'm hesitant about using the word creativity. And the reason it is because creativity traditionally was reserved for the deity. Very few things are created. What Nicola and I do is rearrange stuff. We try to remember, we try to look. We're essentially rearranging. Creativity is exceptionally rare. And when I hear a phrase like the creative industries, it makes me squirm a bit, because the very thing I didn't want to be involved with as a teenager was anything industrial, because that sounds like hard work, and it's a serious thing. So the resonance of art, how does art work? Let's keep going here. I can't do two things at once, as you probably realize. Well, look, this is about the resonance of art, because this big painting here is called Concert. Well, that doesn't need much explanation. But this painting is called The King's Highway. And it was based on a poem by Geoffrey Hill. And Geoffrey Hill is a poet I find extremely difficult, but very Moorish. There's something about Geoffrey Hill I'm drawn towards because I don't quite get it. He wrote a poem called The King's Highway. No, he didn't. He wrote a poem called The Jumping Boy. And I suddenly remembered what I most liked to do as a child. Two things. Run as fast as I could. I'd test myself at school. How quickly could I get there? And to jump. Why? For the sheer thrill and joy of it. What Geoffrey Hill is saying is essentially, you, the artist, all of us, are the jumping boy. We do things for the sheer delight and pleasure of it. That is foundational. You can't get any further. So the ideas of artists are, of course, valuable, but their acts are more valuable. Their touch. And touch is, again, crucial. In a world of the virtual, your touch, or the touch of the artist, brings you into contact with the pathos of the individual and the pathos of time passing. This is called mind. Most of my paintings have a pun in them. Mind, do you mind? A mind, all this sort of thing. This is called momentarium. Although one needs to know, oh gosh, 6 seconds, heck. All right, I'm going to finish with one thing, which is to do with the muse. All of you know about Coleridge, the great poet. There are probably, I'm looking at Rachel now, there are probably only 3 great poems which are transcendent. Christabel, The Rime of the Ancient Mariner, and Kublai Khan. Because they seem impossible, they've jumped out of ordinary poetry. My point is this. It's about the muse. The only thing that interests me is inspiration. The muse is only interested in inspiration. She's not interested in issues. She's not interested in values. She's certainly not interested in virtue. She's only interested in genius and inspiration. And it's fantastically difficult to get there, but in a way it's the only thing worth having. So all of the things that surround art, of course they're benefits, of course art produces these wonderful gains, but we mustn't forget that there are different ends of the spectrum, and my job is to address myself, if I can, entirely to the muse. Thank you.